I worked at a hospital, and one night changed my life forever. I never believed in the paranormal. No ghosts, no signs, no stories about walls remembering anything. A hospital was just a job to me. Sterile hallways, the smell of antiseptic, night shifts that seemed to last forever. Until that night, I got hired as an orderly at a large city hospital right after the army. The job was hard, but stable. Night shifts paid more, so I took them whenever I could. At night, the hospital felt frozen in time. Fewer patients, less noise, less chaos. Only the distant footsteps of nurses and the soft beeping of machines. The building I worked in was old, built in the 1950s. Thick walls, high ceilings, endless corridors. There was the main medical ward and an old wing, officially closed. But when there were no beds left, they still sent critical patients there. The senior staff never liked talking about that wing. They just said, "Don't go there unless you have to." I thought it was superstition, until one night proved otherwise. That shift, there were only 3 of us. Me, the night nurse, Emily, and a resident doctor. Around 2 in the morning, an ambulance brought in a man in his early 60s, stroke, critical condition, no available rooms. The doctor ordered us to place him temporarily in the old wing. Room 417. I remember pushing the gurney down the empty hallway. The lights were dim, flickering, like they didn't want to stay awake either. The air felt colder there, noticeably colder. When we rolled into the room, the man suddenly opened his eyes. He stared straight at me. His eyes were clear and full of terror. "Please, don't leave me here," he whispered. "It's already occupied." I assumed it was stroke-induced delirium. I reassured him, transferred him to the bed, and left. The door closed behind me with a heavy, final sound, like a period at the end of a sentence. Half an hour later, I came back to check on him. The room was empty. The bed was perfectly made. The monitors were off. No patient. No signs of movement. I thought they'd moved him. Forgot to tell me. I went back to the nurse's station, asked Emily. She turned pale. "Are you sure it was room 417? "Absolutely." She was quiet for a long moment, then said softly, "No one's been placed in that room for 10 years. A nurse died there. Night shift. Found in the morning. Heart failure. But people say she never left." I laughed. Too loud, too fast, but something inside me tightened. We decided to check together. When we reached the room, the door was slightly open. The light was on. The man was back in the bed, staring at the ceiling, whispering, "She's here. She's counting steps." Then we heard footsteps behind us, slow, precise. 1, 2, 3. Emily grabbed my hand. The steps stopped right at the door. The air grew heavy, like a concrete slab pressed against my chest. The lights flickered and went out. When the emergency lighting came on, the room was empty again. In the morning, the admission log showed a stroke patient. His name was crossed out in red ink. No explanation. A week later, I quit. No notice, no explanations. I just left. Sometimes I dream of that hallway, the dim lights, and the footsteps counting the distance between me and the door. Since then, I know this for sure. Hospitals don't just hold stories, they continue them, and not everyone leaves alive. Annabelle let out a sigh of relief as the movers finally set down her last suitcase inside the new apartment. In her previous place, which she had rented for years, the elderly landlady, a sweet woman in her 60s, had passed away suddenly. Annabelle had been forced to move out quickly. Now she stood in the middle of a spacious apartment, waiting to meet the new owner. The landlord was a quiet man in his 40s, reserved, few words. Something about his heavy gaze made her uneasy, yet she strangely preferred it that way. No small talk, no personal questions. And the rent for such a large apartment in the city centre was unbelievably low. The only thing that bothered her was the shower. The water drained poorly, always pooling at her feet. Annabelle assumed it was a clog, but kept putting off fixing it. One evening, while showering, the problem returned. Water filled the tub, and her hair clogged the drain again. Annoyed, she removed the cover and reached in, grimacing as her fingers closed around a wet clump of hair. She pulled and pulled. The hair didn't end. Strands kept sliding out of the drain, long, slick, cold, as if being fed from somewhere deep below. Her hand filled, then her arm. Her heart pounded. These aren't my hairs. Still, she couldn't stop pulling. Finally, with a sickening slurp, an enormous mass of hair burst free, thick, heavy, and impossibly long, like it had been torn from multiple heads at once. It fell onto the floor in a dark, glistening heap. Fighting nausea, Annabelle threw it into the trash, rinsed herself off, and tried to forget it ever happened. After that, the shower drained perfectly. Time passed, the memory faded, until one night, while showering and softly humming, she noticed movement behind the curtain. Her chest tightened. She yanked the curtain open and screamed. A figure stood in the steam. Long black hair draped over its shoulders. Exactly like the hair from the drain. Its face was still, its eyes dark and empty. It stepped toward her. Annabelle ran, slipped, and blacked out. She woke up in bed, drenched in cold sweat. The shower was still running. The water flowed smoothly. A dream. At dawn, trembling, she called the landlord. "This is Annabelle from apartment 102. Something terrible happened." He listened in silence. "Stay there, I'm coming." When the knock came, she opened the door and recoiled. The landlord stood there, wearing long black hair. "It was you," she screamed, "watching me." He shook his head slowly. "It's not a wig," he whispered. "It belonged to my daughter." He told her how his daughter had died in that very shower, tangled in her own hair. "I couldn't bury them," he said through tears. "They were a part of her." Annabelle listened, frozen. But once he left, she knew one thing. She couldn't stay. That same day, Annabelle moved out, and the nightmare stayed with her forever. The priest was greedy, and the lifeless woman was beautiful and immensely wealthy. On her finger rested a large gold ring, set with a magnificent gemstone, so striking that it captured the priest's attention the moment he saw it. In October of 1766, after officiating the funeral service for Countess Eleanor Ashcombe, Reverend Thomas Bradley found himself unable to rest. He knew the way to the family crypt well, yet hesitated. He could not have imagined the horror that awaited him that night. Eleanor's father, the Right Reverend William Carter, was a powerful and ambitious man. He rarely spent time with his daughter, devoting himself entirely to his career. After his wife's death, Eleanor was raised by relatives and governesses. In 1757, William Carter became Archbishop of Canterbury, one of the highest spiritual authorities in England. His position granted him confidence, influence, and a sense of superiority over others. Eleanor was his only child, a delicate girl with wide, curious eyes. From an early age, her father sought a suitable match for her. Through his extensive connections, he soon turned his attention to the Earl of Ashcombe. The bride was 17. The groom was 41. The Earl had recently inherited his title, served on the Royal Council, and had earned distinction during his youth in the Navy. He owned a vast estate, a grand house, and possessed considerable wealth. The marriage contract was signed in June of 1761. When the Earl first saw Eleanor, he was astonished. She was young, radiant, intelligent, and gentle beyond expectation. Their wedding took place on the 6th of August. As a gift, the Earl presented Eleanor with family heirlooms, including a tiara, heavy necklaces, and rings. One ring was crafted especially for her, a large gold band set with a magnificent stone, meant to symbolize his eternal love. The new countess was quickly loved by everyone at the estate. She was kind to servants, gracious to her husband's relatives, and devoted to her marriage. Only her fragile health caused concern. Eleanor was deeply sensitive. Small misfortunes affected her profoundly. She wept over damaged rose bushes, fainted when her lapdog fell ill, and only days after her wedding, her father died. Dressed in mourning, she wandered the garden paths, whispering that death at the beginning of a new life was a terrible omen. She lost her first child. While expecting her second, she fell from a horse. Only in 1764 did she give birth to a son, Richard. Afterward, she sank into a deep melancholy that no comfort could lift. In late September of 1766, servants entered her chamber and found her unresponsive. Physicians were summoned. Days passed with no sign of life, and Eleanor was declared dead. She was laid to rest in the family crypt. A visiting priest conducted the burial rites and could not help but notice her beauty and the brilliant ring on her finger. That night, rain fell heavily. Consumed by desire, the priest returned to the crypt. The door was unlocked. By candlelight, he opened the coffin and saw Eleanor move. She took a breath and opened her eyes. The priest fled in terror. Cold and confused, Eleanor made her way home through the storm. Her return caused panic and joy. She was declared alive once more. The path from the crypt became known as the Countess's Walk. Eleanor and her husband lived long and happily. Their son later named his daughter Eleanor, in memory of the mother he once lost and miraculously regained.